Welcome to Proudly American, Devoutly Jewish, thriving at both. It's our pleasure to have you join us, or actually, we're joining you in your own home, on your computer, on your DVD, or wherever you happen to be viewing this. We're happy to have you with us, and we hope that you enjoy the presentation. Most of us, I'm sure, are familiar with the Purim story. In the year 368 BCE, Ahasuerus becomes the king of this vast Persian empire. 9 years later, he decides to have these lavish parties, and his queen, he demands of his queen Vashti to come in a very immodest way. She refuses and is eventually executed. The king is suffering from great despair, and he is advised to bring all the women of his kingdom, of his 180 countries together, and choose the one who would be queen. And out of everyone in the kingdom, the one who least wanted to be chosen was chosen. And Esther, the righteous Esther, became queen. Shortly after her appointment as queen, we find that a villain became the prime minister of Persia. Haman, in Hebrew, Haman. And our rabbis take note of the fact that the appointment of Esther as queen came before the appointment of Haman as prime minister. And of course we know that Haman tried to destroy all the Jewish people. And it was Esther who subsequently beseeched the king Ahasuerus, and because of Esther, the whole Jewish people was saved. Our rabbis take note of the fact that Esther's appointment preceded Haman's appointment. And this teaches us that in God's way of doing things, and in God's way of protecting the future of the Jewish people, God provides the remedy before the affliction. Esther was the remedy, and she was in place even before Haman came to power. So it's no coincidence that in 1492, August 2nd, 1492, the final day when Jews were demanded of to leave Spain, the end of the Spanish, or at least this part of the end of the Spanish Inquisition. At the very same time, the very same day, Christopher Columbus was preparing with 3 ships to leave the harbor. And he wrote in his diary that it was difficult to leave. He was stalled, he had to wait, because there were so many boatloads of Jews who were crowding the harbor to leave. Dark day for the Jewish people. Where do they go? Thousands and thousands of Jews would be homeless. At the very same moment, God was preparing a place of refuge for the descendants of these very same people, America. In the book of Devarim, you'll find this verse actually etched on the stained glass windows at Chafetz Chaim. God tells us, "Hamitzvah hazos These commandments that I command you today, they're not distant from you. They're not far away. Lo me'evar layomhi, they're not across the sea. To say, who can cross the sea and get them? Ki korov elecha, it is close to you. Ma'od, very close. Beficha, it's on your lips. Bilvavcha, in your heart. You can do it. God is telling the Jewish people that there will be times in the future history where you will travel from place to place, and you might say, Judaism the way it was, that belongs somewhere else, a different place, a different time, across the sea. There might be a feeling that we cannot possibly replant the same kind of flowering Judaism that flourished at a different place, at a different time. There was in Europe a yeshiva. The name of this yeshiva was Volozhin, and it was founded by the great Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin, who was the greatest student of Rabbi Elijah of Vilna. Rabbi Elijah of Vilna lived in the late 1700s. And his greatness was so awesome that it was said about him that he was from a different place, from a different time. Centuries before, he was as great as sages centuries before. His greatest student, Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin, founded a yeshiva that lasted 100 years. In 1818, towards the end of Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin's life, one morning, after davening, after services, and this yeshiva was filled with students of an amazingly high caliber of student, Rabbi Chaim burst out crying in front of his students. He stopped, controlled himself, and then burst out crying again. The students were stunned because this had never happened before. After the services, Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin went into his study, and the students gathered together, and they were mystified. They wanted to know what happened. Why was their Rebbe crying? And they sent one of their best students, Rav David Tevel, to go in to speak to Rav Chaim of Volozhin. So he goes into Rav Chaim, and he asks, "We're all so disturbed. We're so bothered. What was bothering the Rebbe?" And he said, since you've come in to ask, I'll tell you. The reason I cried is because there will be a time when the Torah learning and the Torah that is flourishing now in Europe will cease. This will all be destroyed. And there will be another exile. The 10th and final exile. And that will be in America. And in America, there, Judaism, Torah living, will once again flourish and blossom. The student asked the Rebbe, why did the Rebbe cry a second time? Rav Chaim answered, America will be the 10th and final exile before the coming of the Messiah. Following Babylon, North Africa, Egypt, Italy, Spain, France, Germany, Poland, Lithuania, and all the places where Torah had flourished down through history. Torah will once again flourish in America. But the reason I cried is I just don't know. I don't know how strong the level of Torah learning and Torah commitment will be. I don't know how well the leaders of Torah will fare in inspiring the Jews in America to follow the Torah and live by the Torah and learn its precepts. This sequence of flourishing, exile, flourishing, and then exile was already predicted in the Torah. When Jacob was coming back after 22 years of absence, and he was going to be confronted with Esau, he divided his camp, his family was the Jewish people. He divided them into two camps. And he said, if he comes down to one camp and strikes it down, then the remaining camp will survive. America, then, is the Machane HaNishar, the remaining camp that was amazingly foretold by Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin as early as 1818. So Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin cried the second time, what would the quality of Jewish life be in America? Perhaps he was concerned about the quality of Jewish life precisely because of how special America was and was to be in the future. What would be the quality of Jewish life in a country where the familiar, all too familiar reminders of exile for the Jew were absent? A country with no pogroms. A country with no ghettos. A country that stated that all are created equal. How would the Jews fare? It's interesting to note that ironically, in the countries where we were oppressed, simultaneously, Judaism thrived. How would we function? Would we be able to create self-imposed, self-directed, self-generated continuity? In a country where the president sends a letter to a Jewish congregation in 1790, George Washington sent a beautiful letter to the Hebrew congregation of Newport, Rhode Island. And in it, he quoted these magnificent words that have just echoed through time. No to bigotry, no sanction. To persecution, no assistance. This is America. Well, historically, we did not do so well spiritually when we lived in an area where we acquired more civil rights. For example, in France, Napoleon, like Many of his predecessors had the vision of conquering the world, ruling the world, except Napoleon was different. Because wherever Napoleon went and wherever Napoleon conquered, he granted civil rights to Jews. He even created what he called a Sanhedrin, a group of 120 Jews, many of them including rabbis, to discuss and get together and to see how France could serve the Jews, of course, how the Jews could serve France. But this was a new kind of freedom that Jews had never experienced before in Europe. How well did we do? Napoleon emerged in the early 1800s. By 1890, there were 86,000 Jews in France. 500 observant Jews. Shocking. Germany, Austria, these were pre-war Germany, of course, pre-war Austria, pre-World War II. These were countries where we also experienced civil liberties. Walls of ghettos came tumbling down. And when the walls of ghettos come tumbling down, assimilation came rising up. So how would we fare in America? There are stories that when people would come to America and they would see Jews, when they would pass by the Statue of Liberty, they would throw their talis and tefillin overboard. How would we fare in a country where we were told that if you don't work on Saturday, don't come in on Monday? How would we fare in a country where there are no established or very few established Jewish institutions? And as time progressed in the United States, how would we fare when our passion as Jewish Americans was to pursue the American dream? The house, the car, suburbia, sports. Exciting. A new kind of excitement. We would be searching for our Jewish identity. And at the same time, this powerful drive to become the best Americans that we could possibly be. After we left, I want to rewind back to the time when we left Egypt and came into the desert. And Moses goes up on Mount Sinai, revelation on Mount Sinai. God communicates with the whole Jewish people. And the great Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch was an amazing leader. As a young man, he started writing these books, powerful books in Germany. And he inspired thousands and thousands of Jews who would otherwise have assimilated to come back to Jewish living. So Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, he asks this question: why was the Torah given in the desert? Barren, no man's land, nothing there. Couldn't God have found a better place to give the Torah? Perhaps in Israel. Wait, just wait. Israel's the homeland of the Jewish people. Give the Torah there. Why in the desolate desert? And Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch says that this is to teach the Jew and inspire the Jew that even if he is in a desolate desert, he can connect to the Torah. wherever he will be in the world, anywhere in the four corners of the world, the Jew and the Torah are one and inseparable, and the Torah is accessible everywhere. How do we retain our Jewish fervor while America is pursued? First of all, it's important for us to remember our name. Now, did you ever think of the name Hebrew? The Jews are called Jews, the Jews are called Hebrews. Now, why are we called Hebrews? In Hebrew, the word for Hebrews is Ivri. And Abraham was called Abraham the Hebrew, Avraham ha-Ivri. Ivri means from the other side. Abraham came from the other side of the Euphrates River and then came into the land of Canaan, the land of Israel. He was given, our rabbis tell us that he was given that name, Avraham ha-Ivri, the one from the other side, for his descendants to always remember. When you strive to integrate, become acculturated with the country that you are in, always remember your origins. You are from the other side, and there must be a part of you that stands aside and stands apart. How do we begin each holiday? Every single holiday, Passover, Shavuot, Sukkot, we hold up a cup of wine and we say Kiddush. This is the beginning of the Passover Seder, the very first thing at the Passover Seder when our families are gathered together. We hold up the cup of wine and we say the blessing on the wine. And what are the first words after that blessing? Asher Bochar Banu Mikol You chose us from all the nations. Why do we begin the Seder with those words? Why do we begin every single Jewish holiday with those words? May I borrow from the Lion King? Remember, I'll tell you one of the most exciting, for me, the most exciting part of that movie was when Simba is looking up and he hears his father's voice, and his father calls out to him, "Remember who you are." And that was the turning point in his life, in Simba's life. And when he heard those words, "Remember who you are," he turned around, he went back, and he became the Lion King that he was chosen to be, destined to be. So we as Jews, we remind each other at the beginning of the Seder, remember who you are. Remember the pride in being Jewish. Never lose self-respect as a Jew. Never stifle the spiritual vitality that is within you. Never stifle the strength and courage that is within you to thrive as a Jew. Remember who you are. So that's key. I'd like to take us back in time once again. This is 100 years before the Hanukkah story. This was during the early days of the Second Temple. Alexander the Great was on his quest to rule the world. And wherever Alexander the Great went, pillaged, he destroyed, and then seized power. He was about to penetrate into the walls of the holy city of Jerusalem. There lived in Jerusalem a great leader, Shimon HaTzadik, Simon the Just, Simon the Righteous. He was the last of the men of the great assembly, the last of 120 great sages. He was the last one. As Alexander the Great was approaching, Shimon HaTzadik went out from the city walls and stood by the city walls. Alexander the Great is approaching, and the Talmud tells a story that as soon as he saw Shimon HaTzadik, Simon the Righteous, he stopped. He called his troops to a halt, went down from his horse, and knelt on the floor by the feet of Simon the Righteous. His officers were stunned. They never saw anything like this. Alexander the Great literally got off his high horse. And he explained that whenever he goes into battle, the night before he has a dream, and there's an angel that leads him to victory. And the face of this man is the face of the angel. So Alexander the Great was warmed up, and Shimon HaTzadik cut a deal with him. Don't destroy the city. I'll tell you what. The next year, every Jewish baby that's going to be born will name Alexander. And there were some other agreements that were made, and the city became under Greek rule, but was not pillaged. We find the same Shimon HaTzadik, the same Simon the Righteous, speaking right at the beginning of the classic book in the Talmud called Pirkei Avos, Ethics of the Fathers. And these are sayings, these are teachings from the greats of the Mishnah era and the Talmud era. Shimon HaTzadik, Simon the Righteous, says, Al shalosha devarim ha'olam omed. The world stands on three things. There are three pillars of the world: Torah, service, that's performance of commandments, and acts of kindness. These are the three pillars of the world. Simon the Righteous was preparing the Jewish world for exile. How were we to survive? You see, he came face to face with Alexander the Great. He came face to face with the Greek Empire. He saw with his own eyes, and he felt the penetration of the nations of the world coming in to take over Jerusalem and to send the Jews out. How are we going to survive? And he presented the key. And Rabbi Irving Bunim, of blessed memory, in Ethics from Sinai, explains beautifully that there was a specific order. The world stands on three things: Torah, service, and acts of kindness. This is the preparation for the Jew in exile. The way to survive, the first thing must be Torah study. Then will come service, Then will come acts of kindness. But the very first and most important is commitment to study. At the time of the destruction of the temple, when Jerusalem was sieged by the Romans, there was a great dispute between the rabbis and many of the Jews that were behind the Jerusalem walls. There were many followers of the rabbis, but there were those who said, let's fight against the Romans. The rabbis said, no, let's make peace. It's not going to work. We can't. We're just not that powerful. We're not physically powerful. We're not spiritually powerful to fight against the Romans. We've got to talk to them. But there were those who said, no way. We'll never give in to the Romans. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had a nephew, his sister's son. His sister's son was one of the heads of the group that demanded fight with the Romans. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says to his nephew, he calls his nephew quietly, secretly, and he says, this is not going to work. You've got to stop. And he says, they'll kill me, I can't. Then get me out of here. And they devised a plan where Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai would act as if he was sick and then deathly ill. And then he would die. And then he would be carried out in a casket. And then he would go see Vespasian, the head of the Roman legion. And that's what they did. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, of course, was really alive, and his trusted students were carried him outside the walls of Jerusalem in a casket. And the Roman guards said, what's this? And they said, our master, our teacher has died. We've come to bury him. And they said, no, open it up. Let's see. He said it would be a degradation to expose the body of our beloved teacher. Then we'll take spears and pierce it through the casket. They said, no. Is that what you want people to say about Rome? That you go put spears through the casket of a beloved sage? And miraculously, they let them through. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai then gets out of the casket and sneaks into the Roman camp. And they're stunned to see a Jewish rabbi in the Roman camp. He says, I've come to see Vespasian. And they take him into Vespasian. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, hail to the King of Rome! And Vespasian says to him, you are deserving of death on 2 counts. First of all, I am not the king, and you dare to call me king. And second of all, if I am the king, why have you not come until now? And he says, well, let me answer that second question. The reason I didn't come is because they didn't let me. I couldn't get out. Just then, while they were speaking, an emissary messenger comes running in, who had just arrived from Rome. And Nero, the Roman ruler, had died. And a message from Rome that Vespasian had now become the ruler of the Roman Empire. Vespasian was impressed. And he says, okay, look, I have to do what I have to do. We have to destroy. We're going to fight you. But Are there anything, any special wishes that you have? And one of the three things that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked for is, Tein li Yavne v'chachomeho. Give me the Sanhedrin. Keep the Sanhedrin alive. Keep the sages alive. Let them go out of Jerusalem into the city of Yavne and keep the teachings of Judaism alive. And Vespasian acquiesced. And the sages, the teachers of the Sanhedrin, were saved. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai knew, like Shimon HaTzadik, like Simon the Righteous before him, that the key to survival of the Jew in Israel and certainly in exile is the study of Torah, commitment to Torah study. As a matter of fact, let me share with you a Mishnah. And this is actually said every morning at the beginning of the services. These are the precepts whose fruits a person enjoys in this world, but whose principle remains intact for him in the world to come. In other words, these are giants. Here come a list of giant mitzvos. In other words, no matter what when you do these mitzvos, you get spiritual benefit upon spiritual benefit, and it's eternal. They are honor due to father and mother, acts of kindness, early attendance at the house of study morning and evening, hospitality to guests, visiting the sick, providing for a bride, escorting the dead, absorption in prayer, bringing peace between man and his fellow. And here's how this list ends. And the study of Torah is equivalent to them all. Why is the study of Torah equivalent to them all? And the commentaries explain, because when the Jew studies Torah and is committed to the study of Torah, then everything else follows. Then hospitality to guests follows. Then peace between man and man follows. Then the house of prayer, coming to the house of prayer follows. Everything follows. But the first step and the most vital step is the study of Torah. In 1929, during the Depression, in the United States of America, the Chafetz Chaim wrote, there was a great sage, the Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Israel Meir HaKohen, he wrote these magnificent letters to Jews wherever they were in the world. And he wrote about the Depression. And he said, in America, Jews need to return to Torah study. Torah study. It used to be that a person would come home from work. He would go to study, be part of a group, a Mishnah group, a Torah, a Bible group, a Talmud group. There was such a thing as Medrash, studying Medrash. Different forms of study, but everybody studied. He wasn't only speaking about America, he was speaking about the world also, the Chafetz Chaim. The key is Torah study. What kind of Torah study? What kind of Torah study? Why is the study of Torah equivalent to them all? And one of the commentaries on this last Mishnah that we just read explains that what should be sought in the study of Torah is chidush, something new, a wow. In other words, when we study Torah, studying Torah will have an impact if we can say, wow, I didn't realize that. Well, this is a new insight. Now I understand this verse. Or now I understand this particular issue. Now I understand why this particular mitzvah is observed. It's a light bulb opening up, turning on. As a matter of fact, what do we say at the Havdalah service? La Yehudim Haisa Ora V'Simcha. But the Jewish people, there was light and joy. Our rabbis tell us that the light that we're talking about is the light of Torah. You think of Torah as turning a light on. A light on. And you know what has happened to us? What has happened to us? Our Torah study and on a national scale is focused on bar mitzvah, bas mitzvah. And after that, what happens? Certainly for a bar mitzvah boy or bas mitzvah girl, the light turns on when it's over. That's when the light turns on. But they never are given the opportunity to have a wow in their Torah study. I'm not just talking about children, I'm talking about adults. This is the key to survival, the key to remaining devoutly Jewish is, as Shimon HaTzadik says, Torah, service, and acts of kindness. Torah first. That's how to remain devoutly Jewish. How do we remain proudly American? Let me share with you an episode in the history of American Jewry. On September 11th, 2001, there was a Jew, an observant Jew, an Orthodox Jew, Avrami Zelmanowitz. He worked for Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield. And for 12 years, he worked together with a co-worker who was a quadriplegic, Ed B.A. He was, at 22, he was seriously hurt in a diving accident. Ed he was a quadriplegic, but he tried to live a normal life. He watched TV, saw movies, went to work, took the subway every day, and he worked on the computer in a very special, unique way. But he had to have a nurse's aide constantly 24 hours a day. So on that day, smoke was filling the World Trade Center, and the nurse's aide was starting to cough. And Avrami tells her, "Go down." And she says, "No." And he says, "No, go down." And she says, "I can't leave Ed." "No, I'll stay with him. You go down." He knew full well what might happen. He phoned his sister-in-law and told her what was happening. She begged him, "You've got to go." And he says, "I can't leave Ed. We'll wait here till a rescue team arrives." And the rescue team did not arrive. Maybe they perished in the stairwell as they were trying to carry Ed down, or maybe he was still in the office. But months later, both their bodies were found. Avrami Zelmanowitz is buried on the Mount of Olives near his parents. I had the privilege to visit his grave. President Bush declared before the U.S. Congress, "We have seen our national character in eloquent acts of sacrifice." Inside the World Trade Center, one man who could have saved himself stayed until the end by the side of his quadriplegic friend. This was America's darkest day. A Jewish American on America's darkest day risked his life and sacrificed his life to save a fellow American. We are indeed proudly American, because in America, Jews have flourished and thrived in areas that were always off limits in any other exile. We are proudly American. You know why? Because in the American dollar, what does it say? In God we trust. Imagine, in God we trust. What a country. We're proudly American. No cruel and unusual punishment in America. We're proudly American because, thank God, in the hundreds of years that we have been here, we have never, thank God, experienced a pogrom. Unheard of in anywhere in all of our history, in all of our travels. Proudly American because in American law, as in Jewish law, innocent until proven guilty. We're proudly American because America protects the downtrodden. We're proudly American because in America you don't have to go underground to study Torah. We're proudly American because America was the first country in the world to recognize our beloved state of Israel. We're proudly American because in America, if God forbid you wind up in jail, you can get kosher food in jail. We're proudly American because in many stadiums across the country, if you want to go to a ball game, you can buy a kosher hot dog, glatt kosher. We're proudly American because America respects every individual. Looking at our Torah, in chapter 2, verse 7 of Bereshit, of Genesis, God created man from the dust of the earth and breathed into his nostrils a neshama, a soul of life. The human being. Read the Torah. Every human being is endowed with a neshama, with a soul, Jew or non-Jew. Whatever color your skin happens to be, if you're human, you have a neshama, you have a soul. This is why we need to be proud of America. As George Washington wrote in 1790, to bigotry, no sanction; to persecution, no assistance. That is what America stands for. There's a verse in Jeremiah. It's an amazing, illuminating verse. The prophet Jeremiah is teaching the Jewish people, speaking to the Jewish people in Babylonia. These are the Jews who were exiled from Babylonia, exiled from Israel, and now in Babylonia. And he says to them, and you could look at this verse, it's in Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 7. Seek the peace of the city to which I have exiled you, and pray for it to Hashem. You're in a place, you're in a country, pray for it, and pray for the peace and success of that country. So we are proudly American. And as the holiday of Passover approaches, it certainly would be appropriate to think about the gift of freedom that we Jews have enjoyed in the United States of America. And let us pray, as it says in Isaiah, that we continue to remain devoutly Jewish. How does that happen? How does that happen? Simon the Just taught us that. Torah first, than service and acts of kindness. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai taught us that. Tein li yavne v'chachamel, give me Jewish learning. In the prophet Isaiah, chapter 59, verse 21, we're taught, Udivorai, God speaks to the Jewish people and says, Divorai asher samti beficha, the words that I have put into your lips, lo yamushu, may they not depart, mipicha, from your lips, umipi zaracha, and from the lips of your children, umipi zera zaracha, and your children's children, ad olam, for all eternity. Let us hope and pray that wherever we are, as Jews, we can continue to remain devoutly Jewish by looking for the wows when we study our holy Torah. And when we think of America, and when we pray for America, oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Now this song has special meaning for us because we read in the Torah, it's not across the sea. It's not somewhere else in a different place in a different time. But Judaism can thrive. And we can remain devoutly Jewish, not across the sea, but from sea to shining sea.